So today we're going to start out our Excel exercises. I do believe that I've made this Excel activity due for Friday or for next Friday, and usually it's going to be the case. It's a week. The only reason I bring that up is that since we're not actually doing Excel 2 next Friday, since we're out on Labor Day, then we're going to be doing our classroom discussion on Friday, and we're going to skip the next Excel activity for 2 weeks. So usually I set it for 2 weeks, but I think I've made it a week from now. I will stick for that from now, but if people are having trouble getting through this activity in 1 week, let me know, and we can work with it. I don't think this will be too difficult. Once you kind of get rolling on this one, it's pretty straightforward. So as I mentioned before, I expect everybody in this room to be very strong in Excel. There may be some things that I'm going to teach you today that you already know. In fact, I expect you to know most of them. This is not about whether or not you know how to do individual components, but how you can utilize individual components together in a summary function. And so for this first one, I've traditionally done an activity where I wanted to try to do some formatting techniques that you don't traditionally use. And I decided to expand it out a little bit because I think that it's important to understand, particularly in this day and age of concerns about cyber attacks and workplace security, that you need to understand how to protect information from outside use. Now, I won't say that this is going to be foolproof. I really kind of was enlightened when a friend of mine who works in IT technologies kind of showed me a hacking program where you can bypass the password protection of any Excel workbook with a simple outside macro. That was kind of frustrating. So this is not going to be a perfect solution, but there's an old statement about cybersecurity which we're actually going to see. I think I believe we're going to talk a little bit about that later this semester. And it's from John Oliver's show last week tonight, which says in a day and age where people have their doors wide open, just closing the door may be enough to deter people from doing things or just locking the door. So we are going to talk about security and protection. I'm not going to sit here and tell you or stand here and tell you that this is going to be the end all be all and this will solve all your problems. But I do think it's a good routine to get into. So there are a few things that I want to make sure that we are clear on how to do, because these are tasks that you should know. One thing that I will say, anything that I tell you about or talk about, this is not something that not all these things are things that I learned myself when I was taking classes. A lot of these are kind of trial and error, especially when we start talking about Alteryx in a few weeks. A lot of my work comes from just going onto Google and saying, how do I do this task in Alteryx? So I would encourage you, as we're going through these activities, if you want to discover how to do some things on your own or different ways to approach things, web searches are going to be your best friend, all right? And get very, very acclimated to do that, because once you graduate in a year from now and you're out on your own, you're not going to be able to go to your senior associate and say, hey, can you teach me what how do you run a VLOOKUP again? Okay, they're going to look at you and say, this is something you should already know how to do. But you know who doesn't judge? Google. Google doesn't judge, okay? They track your information, but they don't judge. All right, they track it. Right. All right, let's go ahead, and I want you to download the file. So I closed Brightspace, but I wanted to leave it open. So I wanted to show you what the files that we're going to be using for, and of course I have to log back in. Talk amongst yourselves. What's your favorite Google formula? All right, so my apologies for that. So you should have in the file, if you go to the workbook or the assignment that's set up, I'm a little bit worried that it's going to go to my edit assignment. I just wanted to view the assignment. You actually have the assignment instructions, but there should be an Excel file associated with it. Now, if you have not already downloaded that and got it ready, go ahead and do that. I actually gave you the password to open the file, so let's just go ahead and open the file up. Not this file, but the other file that we want to have open. The example file. And I'm going to explain a little bit about where this file comes from. Oops, there we go. So you will notice there's a crossword puzzle here. It says, okay, great, Barnes is teaching us how to make crossword puzzles. And the answer is kind of, okay? But this is actually part of a research project that I'm working on with McNair Scholar, and the whole goal eventually of this is to turn this into a video game. This is kind of a preliminary step. But I'm actually kind of proud of this setup because we were talking about how can you put in a crossword puzzle into Excel. And some of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to actually have a few features that were in place. Now, some of these are pretty traditional features, like the workbook protection is pretty straightforward. Does everybody know how to do workbook protection, like set a password? If you don't, this is going to be kind of a common step for all of these. So this would actually be, and by the way, multiple ways to go about this. I'm just showing you the way that I do it. Go to File, Info, and then it's going to have workbook protection that's listed up here. And there's a couple different ways to go about this. That's the encrypt with password. That actually locks the entire workbook from access. You cannot open the workbook unless you have that encryption in place. Other things that you may note is that there's no way to actually change anything in the workbook with the exception of a few things. Like there's a few input areas, like the crossword puzzle I can put information in. But if I try to edit like this clue right here, like I'm going to say this clue is bogus, it's going to say, nope, you can't edit this. It's not allowed. All right, it does not allow you to edit. So I can't do that. And plus, we go down here. This is all grayed out, and you'll notice that I can't actually access any of the other workbook tabs, which actually has some of my floating information for this cell. So this all comes from that same tab we were just looking at, or same tool we're looking at. Protecting the sheet and then protecting the workbook structure, which are all really important protection protocols. And so these are how you would set those up. Now, there is one thing I want to talk about because I do think that this is relevant and something that you may need to think about in your own security in the future. The first one and the last one, pretty much this is just click on it and set up a password. That's all there really is to it. And if you want to unlock it, you just click on it and type in the password and it unlocks. So there's not too much significant to that. But for this one right here, the protect the current sheet, this one creates a little bit of quandary. And I want to show you what that quandary is by going into a blank Excel work. Okay. So I'm going to wait here while it opens up their file. There we go. Okay. So let's say that I'm just going to highlight this cell right here, and I want to protect every single cell in this worksheet except for the highlighted one. I want the highlighted one to be something I can input. If I go over here, I go to Info, and I'm going to do Protect Workbook and say Protect Current Sheet. I'm going to type in a password. I'm going to do 123, which, by the way, you should never use as a password. Okay. But I don't particularly care if anybody hacks this particular worksheet, as I'm going to delete it once I'm done with it, okay? So dynamic passwords only, but we'll just do 123 just for time saving. And I've got to confirm it, so I just want to type in 123. Now I've locked the worksheet, which is good because I can't edit this cell right here, but you know what else I can't edit? I can't edit this cell right here, which is the one that I wanted to edit. So how do we actually set up a worksheet where we can edit certain cells and lock out other cells? Well, the first chore is going to be unlock our worksheet. Okay, so let's go ahead and unlock it. So 123, our dynamic password, which again, we're never going to use that password ever. It sounds like a joke. We actually will look at an example. We'll look at some cybersecurity examples later on. The co-op, I can't remember, it's in Iowa, that got hit with a cyber attack a few years ago. They had a default password of chicken1 or chicken123 or something like that. A lot of people were never changing that password. So basically the cyber attackers just typed in chicken123 and then all of a sudden they were able to access the firm's infrastructure. So yeah, if I joke about that, it sounds too ridiculous to be true because we're all really intelligent people in here, and yet that's the way that works in the real world. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about how we protect this. So what I want to do is I want to format this cell. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to go to Format Cells. And you should be familiar with this already. This actually edits the properties of the cells, but I'm going to go to protection. And you will notice that on protection, it says locked here. And basically what that means is that when this worksheet is locked, this cell is locked. But if I specify that this cell I want to unlock, that unlocks, proverbially speaking, a whole bunch of possibilities. So let's go ahead and redo this task now. Remember, we're locking the worksheet. My dynamic password, my quote unquote dynamic password. And now I can actually edit in this cell, but I can't edit in any other cell. It gives me the same error of edit that. So if you didn't know how to do that, that's something really important to note because you may want to actually have a worksheet set up where only certain items are going to be input, particularly if you've got survey workbooks where you want responses to go in certain areas, but you don't want the response prompts to be edited. So something to keep in mind. All right, like I said, I'm deleting this worksheet so there's no security issues whatsoever. So this kind of sets up what we're talking about over here. And this is where the fun part comes in. All right. So this is our activity. This is the activity that me and my Aristotle set up. And I wanted to make sure that when people did this activity, they worked on the first part of the activity and that alone. Because there's multiple parts to the activity. There's multiple puzzles within this lesson. And you will notice there's another puzzle and then a third puzzle down here. But there's a prompt set up saying, okay, you have to complete the first puzzle to unlock. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's just go ahead and complete the first puzzle. And this is a question about investing concept or questions about investing concepts. So let's go ahead and we're going to do across and then down. So I'll put them in here. So what is the blank value of what a future amount is worth now? What did you all talk about in 221? Is that called present value? Okay. I probably shouldn't ask you guys this. This is not what the lesson is about. This lesson is about something else, but I figure you're an intelligent guy, folks. We can ask about that. All right, if that's the case, then blank value is what amount will be worth at a future point in time. That word future is really, really key. This one's one I didn't know until I did the research on. So traditional investments, bonds, stocks, and loans. Does anybody know what those are called? Called endeavors. Okay, endeavors. All right, now we'll go down. So what is the act of reinvesting returns back into investments? Compounding. Compounding. Oops, I'm in the wrong cell. Try this. All right. Potential, the earnings potential of investment. What is that called? Return. Yes, return. And then a four-letter word that begins with the letter R. Possible loss of the investment. We're familiar with this one. Yeah. Well, look what happens here. Lo and behold, I finished the crossword and it all turns green. Isn't that amazing? Amazing. More importantly, we actually now have a puzzle down here. Okay. So this is kind of a subtle way of protecting workbook features, but you actually have to finish one part in order to be able to advance to another part. All right. And you can actually go through and do this for the next part too, because this puzzle down here is locked. But until you actually unlock this part right here, let's see if I get this. I'm trying to remember from memory if this is correct. This puzzle is actually pretty easy. Okay. Third puzzle was only locked when you finish the second puzzle. We're not going to do the third puzzle because that's actually present value calculate or time value money calculations, which I don't want to waste time on. All right. So here we go. Yeah, that's actually how we're doing it. So let's talk a little bit about some of these because some of these are pretty straightforward. Some of these are less intuitive. Now, I have a really big fascination with using the function that actually once you enter something, a value in the cell, it's a correct value, that it turns it green or turns it to a different color. Does anybody know what that's called? What function you use to do that? Conditional formatting. Okay, conditional formatting. I've had to get away from that because I've actually run into a few students who have mild color blindness, and so when I do like coloring to try to indicate correctness or incorrectness, it doesn't really help. So I'm trying to work on that, but I will use it for this, and I apologize if you have color blindness in this. I'm trying to get better about accessibility, but I think that this is something to reinforce. There's different ways of representing this, but we'll talk about those. So let's talk about conditional formatting. Formatting an input cell is actually pretty easy. All right. Basically, all you're going to do is you're going to say once an input value is achieved in that cell, we're actually going to change the it's going to change color. So let's just type in the word input, and all of a sudden, it changes color, it changes in representation. And all this is if we go to conditional formatting, go to manage rules, it says the cell value contains a certain value. If it contains the word input, then it's going to actually leave the cell to green. If not, it's just going to leave the cell blank. Now you'll notice the cell is yellow. I've highlighted the cell yellow previously, so it retains its previous value. That's why it's yellow rather than blank. So this is interesting, but what I think is more interesting is can we set it up so that if you actually have a situation, obviously we can because I did it, but you have a situation where you don't want anything to highlight until all values are met. Like you'll notice the crossword puzzle didn't come green until everything was typed in.
So how do we do that? And obviously, there has to be a conditional formatting feature where you can actually set up for secondary values, okay, for secondary values to set up. So what does that look like? Well, I type an input here, and you'll notice that the secondary cell highlights, which is again just conditional formatting, but the conditional formatting formula is a little bit different. So you'll notice it says the formula, I'm looking at a specific cell, and if a specific cell has the word input in it, then this cell will highlight, which is kind of cool, okay? It's kind of cool because you can actually cross multiple cells and have all the cells have the same feature. So I delete inputs, they all on highlight. I re-put input back in, they highlight again. All right, so that's kind of our first feature. Now, there's a few other things that we need to talk about. Now, this one is fairly complicated. It's not complicated in the functions, but it's complicated in organization tasks. So remember, back in my previous setup, I had to have everything input correctly in order for the puzzles to work out. So you'll notice this information down here is not present. If I delete any one of these values, it just goes away. So how did that happen? How did that happen? The answer is, unfortunately, this is not conditional formatting. It's a little bit more complex series than that. And I want to give you some ideas about how we can actually set this up. So the first step of this is going to be trying to look for certain values. Now, for conditional formatting is looking for a value if it's present at all in the cell. So if I have, say, the word input, because I'm looking for the value input, it will actually recognize that. But what if I say something like Dr. Barnes said input? Will that still recognize? The answer is yes, because it says it has the word input in it. It's looking for any part of that or any part of the cell to contain that phrase. So what if I want to have that same feature looking in a cell specifically, a formula that looks like that for that? You may say, well, we could just actually say equal Dr. Martin, equal input. Would that work? So it will look for the word input, but it will look only for that particular phrase, okay? If it has anything else in there, like if you typed in, okay, input plus or input exclamation point, it will come back as a false bar, or it will come back as not a match. So what we want to do is we want to actually have a formula that can say, all right, we're going to look in this cell, and if that cell contains this term at all, it will bring back a match. It will bring back a match. And the formula we're going to use is a combination. It's a combination of is number and search. All right. So the way that I've got this formula set up right now, you can see the formula up here is equals is number search, and I'm looking for the term input one. Now I'm just going to type in input one, but it's looking for the term the presence of that term anywhere at all in this cell. Okay. So if I have any phrase or any statement that's got input followed by the number one, it will come back as a match. So let's just try it. So I'm going to do the first one pretty straightforward. Input one, and it says true. All right, it comes back with a result of true. Now I'm going to try this next one. I'll say input. I need to put a number. Input 2, but I'm also going to put a yeah in there just because I'm really excited about this lesson. And I forgot my glasses, so I'm putting spaces where they shouldn't belong. So it's looking for input 2 in the second cell, but it comes back and says, okay, input 2 is present there. And you can kind of see what the trend is here, input 3. So yeah, that's how we actually look for specific text within a cell. We use the function is number search. So that's first step. That's the first step. The next step is that we're going to be looking for conditions to be met in order for information to be put out. So you'll notice here that I've got a cell, this is an if formula, and an if formula is a dichotomous formula. It basically says, if this condition is met, you return this result, okay? If the condition is not met, you return this result. So let's go back here. Oops, back here. So I've got a whole bunch of pieces of information here that are now present because a condition has been met. What was the condition here? The condition was all of these numbers were input correctly, right? If I delete this one value, all of those inputs go away. Now, how did that happen? Likely there's a series of if statements that say, if all of those conditions are met, you can actually return the result that actually allows them to work on the puzzle. But if none of those conditions or one of those conditions is not met, if one of the conditions is not met, any one is not met,
going to return a statement that says, hey, you haven't done everything you need to do. You can't move forward. So that's basically how we set this up. Now, this gets a little bit tricky and complex. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about how this is set up. So the first one is to set up an if statement. Okay, so let's just go ahead and set up a simple if statement. This is going to be meeting conditions. All right. Now, my if statement is going to be based on the is number search. All right, my is number search parameters. Now I'm looking for the input or for the actual word input. So let's type that in. And when input comes in, this turns a value of true. All right, returns a value of true. And then it actually says once true is met, the condition is met. Now, by the way, I do want to point this out because this gets a little bit confusing. If you look in the formula up there, the word true is not in quotation marks, which is a little bit non-intuitive. You may say, why is it not in quotation marks? That's a text input. And technically speaking, we would expect a text input to be covered by the text quotations for true. But true is a condition that Excel represents, true or false. So we don't actually need to specify it as text input because we're looking for something that Excel returns a cell. So when we're looking for that dichotomous check, you can actually just put in true or false, whichever condition you're looking for. So that's why you don't need to put in quotation marks. In fact, if you do put quotation marks, it won't work. All right. Now that's easy if we only have one condition to be met. We don't even need that is number search statement. We can just actually write a if search here, if condition to have our condition be met. The reason I set it up this way is what if we have multiple conditions that we have to be met? Remember in the puzzle that we looked at before, there were multiple conditions that had to be met and you had to be able to work through all those conditions. Well, in that case, we're going to need something a little bit more subtle to be able to pick this up. All right. So now we have our input statements, inputs 1, 2, and 3. It's actually looking to see if those statements are true, if those statements are present. And then there's a count down here. It's a countif function that's saying, all right, I'm looking for the occurrence of true. All right. Return the number of values times that true comes up. And then below that, conditions are met. It's saying if there are 3 true statements, or in other words, if this count comes up to 3, then it's actually going to say the condition is met. What happens if I change any one of these? Like what if I delete this term input? The condition is not met because it changes the count. So if you're asking again, what's going on in the spreadsheet? What ended up happening is on a separate worksheet within the spreadsheet, I've got a whole bunch of if statements. They're saying, I'm looking for all these conditions to be met. Each one of these has to be specifically those numbers. If that's the case, a true condition is reached, and then I count the number of true conditions. And once that true condition count hits 5, everything down here is unlocked. Make sense? Okay. See a lot of wandering faces. I hope I didn't lose everybody. Okay. All right. So that is going to be the focus of what you're going to be doing. Is you're going to be doing something very similar to what I did. All right. So you're going to create an Excel workbook with a simple activity with unlock conditions, similar to what the Excel workbook that I just gave you. At least one of the unlock conditions should be a change in text that takes place when a certain input or series of inputs occurs. So just like the puzzles that I was showing you, when you actually meet the conditions of all of the text being input properly, it unlocks a second puzzle or unlocks a second area of the workbook. All right. In addition, add standard workbook security and protection elements to prevent users from manipulating your files should include workbook format protection, with the exception of the input cells, which we now know how to make those input cells blank. Workbook structure protection or workbook password protection. Be sure to include all passwords with your assignment submission. This is a really important one, by the way, because I can't grade your assignment if I can't look at it. Okay. All right. With that, I think, what do we got? About 16 minutes to work on that. So I'm going to go ahead and let you guys work on this for a little bit, and then we'll wrap up here shortly, closer to the end of class. All right, let's talk real quick before we I just want to make sure that we have an understanding of what's happening behind the scenes. I deliberately did not let you unlock the other worksheets because I want you to kind of work on this on your own or develop your knowledge in this area. Just copying from what I'm doing is not going to particularly help. So, but I think it's important to understand what is going on. So there, I was talking about this when we were paused. There is another worksheet that's within the workbook that is doing a lot of features behind the scenes. So what's going on? What is happening in the situation? Well, with numeric inputs, it's pretty straightforward. Like say, for example, I want to have the values 1, 2, and 3 here. I can actually write a formula saying, all right, I'm looking for the value 1. It's just equals that cell equals whatever the number is, and it will turn the value true or false. So if I put something else in here, if I put 5, it's gonna come back false. So that's the values I'm looking for. And then I've got a cell which is a countif here that's just looking for the countif to be the number of occurrences of true. So this is actually, you see 3 truths, so it's actually returning the value 3. And then finally, there's an if statement down here that's saying, all right, if all 3 of those are being met, it returns a value. If they're not being met, it returns a different value. So as you can see, whenever I change this, it changes from audit to tax. Okay, change from audit to tax. Now, also something to note is that it does not have to be a value input here. You can actually put into the if statements, you can put a blank value, which means that basically I could actually start with a condition being met or finish with a condition being met, but it starts out just being blank, which should kind of give you some idea of what's happening in the spreadsheet. Also, when it comes to numeric values, it's very easy because you just actually look specifically equal for that value. You're just looking for the equality to that value. Remember, for text inputs, you have to use that isNumber search function in order to be able to find that. So that's basically why I showed you the isNumber search function, which is effectively the same idea. You're looking to see if there's an occurrence of that particular string, that particular text. If that text exists, it comes back and says true. If the text does not exist, it says false. But the features are basically the same. It's just setting up, trying to look for all those situations. And if all those conditions are being met, you can start writing if statements saying, when this condition is met in this cell, I want to return this value in this cell. That's basically how the infrastructure of the workbook is set up so that it returns those values and it's set up that way. And so, yeah, that's kind of the backbone of it. I look forward to seeing how we can create a Minesweeper game from that particular setup. But I'll leave you all to that outside of class. I will see you all next Wednesday. Have a good long weekend.